Good morning. Mr. Smitty, good morning, sir. Looks like we are ready to begin the March 14th, 2011 Assembly Committee on Appropriations meeting. We have a quorum, it looks like. Madam Secretary, please establish a quorum.
Fuentes.
Here.
Harkey. Here. Bloomingfield. Here. Bradford. Here. Calderon. Campos. Davis. Donnelly. Here. Gatto. Here. Hall. Hill. Here. Lara. Mitchell. Nielsen. Here. Norby. Solario. Present. Wagner. Here.
Very good. We have a quorum, and seeing that we do not have President Pro Tem Steinberg in, Mr. Smitty, would you like to come on up and present on your bill, please? SB 2 in the Extraordinary Session 1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members. This is, in fact, SB 2 in the extraordinary session. The bill has been heard by your two policy committees, Utilities and Commerce, and by the Resources Committee, passed out of both committees, which is why we're before you here today. Fairly straightforward, obviously, on the basic components of the bill. It enacts into California law a 33% renewable energy portfolio for the year 2020. And perhaps noteworthy that it does that for both private and public utilities, as well as other retail sellers.
Mr. Smitty, would you mind moving up just a little closer to the microphone there? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Thank you. I'm fighting off a little something, and I apologize. I'll speak right up. It's important to note, Mr. Chairman and members, that while the bill calls for 33% by 2020, the bill does provide significant flexibility in reaching that goal. It also protects ratepayers from excessive rate costs. And perhaps most significantly in this difficult time, it creates California-based jobs and helps the state economy. I should mention, with respect to protecting ratepayers from the costs concerns that have been raised, that the bill now contains language authorizing the PUC to impose cost caps on each utility, and would invite you to look at pages 41 and 42 for that language. Those cost caps are set to protect against disproportionate rate impacts on various ratepayer classes and include all renewable procurement costs as part of their calculation. On the issue of flexibility, for utilities and other sellers, the bill now establishes a series of off-ramps, as we call them, that utilities could take to deal with circumstances beyond their control. We're talking about things like insufficient transmission, permitting and siting delays, inadequate supply. This language is primarily found on page 40, if this is an area of interest to you. And very simply put, Mr. Chairman and members, folks in the utility world have said, we don't mind shooting for 33% by 2020, but please don't require us to access energy that either isn't there or that we can't get to by virtue of transmission constraints. That protection is in the bill. Some of you who have been living with this bill far longer than you would like may recall that back in 2009 we had a bill, passed both houses of the legislature, went to the governor. The governor vetoed the bill, and one of the concerns that we had a lot of talk about was the definition of delivered energy. And we've scrapped that definition, which was in large measure the basis for the governor's veto. We've established something called a loading order, which essentially says, here's our first priority for gathering renewable energy, here's our second priority, and here's our third priority. That language is on page 45 to 47, and I have to say I think it has gone a long way towards bringing folks who previously could not support the bill onto our very long support list. There are provisions that grandfather all renewable resources that were already contracted for by a utility as of June 1st, 2010, so the new limits will apply only to energy that was not yet built or approved at that time. And I think what I would like to do there, Mr. Chairman, is just stop and say I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, but I'm quite happy that we have a very broad base of support, as I think you'll see when witnesses come forward.
Very good. Let's go ahead and move to witnesses in support and in opposition, and then we will move to questions from the panel.
Mr. Chairman and members, Scott Wetch on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees. the State Association of Electrical Workers, the California State Pipe Trades Council, and the Western States Council of Sheet Metal Workers in support of the bill. This is a compromise document. It has gone through now 3 years of sort of transformation to a point where we have a broad base of support. We believe that the bill in its current form will mean hundreds of thousands of jobs to California that we badly need. And just about a month ago, the Cal ISO released its newest figures on what is approved for the transmission queue in the form of proposed projects. Currently, there's about 45,000 megawatts of renewable projects that are approved by Cal ISO to go on online. Out of those, about 39,000 are projected to be built in California. So you take that coupled with the good, 10 to 15,000 megawatts of distributed generation rooftop solar projects we believe are out there, and you have more than enough to double, actually, the size of this bill in the form of renewables. So we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Next witness.
Mr. Chair and members, Erin Niemela representing the Large Scale Solar Association. We are the association of utility-scale solar developers and wholesalers. We support the bill. We believe that this bill alone creates more than 88,000 large-scale solar jobs in this state. On average, for the 160 projects that we have on state, this bill will create 500 jobs and $2.5 million in tax revenue, local and sales rather, and property tax per project. We also want to note that increasingly this industry's contracts, which are long-term contracts that help lower the cost of natural gas because they hedge those gas prices and create stability, those 15-year plus contracts are actually coming in at below the market rate of gas. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Mr. Chair and members, Don Gilbert representing Terragen Power. Terragen supports the bill, feels that it's vital to have 33% in statute to enable financing and more quick development of projects. That has been an issue that they have experienced right now, problems with financing because 33% is not in statute. I also wanted to say Terragen has about 1,000 megawatts of wind, solar, and geothermal in the state. The largest wind facility in the world is the Alta Wind Energy Center that we're developing right now. Some of it's already developed in Kern County. In 2011, this year, Terragen will pay $40 million in local taxes to Kern County because of this project. The project's going to get a lot bigger also. I know that some taxpayer groups in some districts who I don't feel have any understanding really of what this bill does, since it's a rate bill, not a tax bill, have stated some concerns. They ought to think about the fact of these projects help offset individual taxes, the need to increase individual taxes because they create taxes in the state, tax revenue. This project will create about 1,000 construction, operation, and maintenance jobs and will contribute $1.2 billion to the economy in Kern County over the life of the project. Thank you.
Next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members, Donna Brownsley with the Solar Alliance, which is an organization which represents 32 solar companies here in the state of California. This bill we strongly support because it continues the renewable policies of the state of California, which has resulted in since 2005, bringing $2 billion in private investment capital to the state. The price of solar systems has decreased 40% since 2008, and last year, as opposed to 5 years ago, there were 2 solar manufacturing plants here in the state of California. There are now between 10 and 15 that are either producing solar panels, in the process of construction, or the process of putting their financing together, because the market is what brings those companies here. So for private investment, jobs, and the local and state revenue from the renewable industry, we urge your aye vote.
Mr. Chair, members, I'm Julie Malinowski-Ball, representing the California Biomass Energy Alliance. This is a trade association of the 33 states' solid fuel biomass power producing facilities located in 19 counties throughout the state, representing a couple thousand employees. I wanted you to look at this bill just a little different. You're going to hear testimony today about companies coming up, about new jobs, building new development, but at the same time, I want you to think about the jobs that exist here today. For those facilities that will be coming off their current contracts in the next 5 to 8 to 10 years, they're going to be in the mix of renewable procurement by the utilities, and these facilities want to be considered a part of that as well. So the jobs today are dependent on this bill for the future requirements for the utility, and we urge you to an aye vote. Thank you.
Lenny Goldberg on behalf of TURN, representing residential ratepayers in the state of California before the PUC for the last 30 years or so. We are very pleased with the rate controls that are in this bill. We have a least cost best fit ordering that makes sure that the least cost projects, those that fit best with the demand for power, are first in the queues. We have transparency here so we can really see the nature of the agreements between the utilities and the renewable developers, so that there is cost control from that transparency. And there is a cap on total costs in the program, which will mean that if this program starts to get too costly to ratepayers, that we suspend it. We think that with the cost of solar coming down and all the development that's taking place, that may not be necessary. And we are very appreciative to your Utilities and Commerce Committee in particular for making sure that those cost controls that will benefit ratepayers work. So we support the bill.
Mr. Chairman and members, Randy Chin with Southern California Edison. We support this bill because it provides us with the flexibility that we need to procure renewable power at the least costly rates, and it provides some clarity on the rules going forward. So we ask your support.
Mr. Chairman and members, Bob Giroux on behalf of the Sun Power Corporation. I'd like to echo the comments of both Ms. Brownsey and Ms. Niemela, whose associations we're a member. I'd like to thank yourself and Senator Simitian for your leadership on the issue, and we support the bill.
Rena Venturini on behalf of the Calpine Corporation. We are also in support of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Bonnie Holmes-Jen with the American Lung Association in California, and we are strongly supporting this bill as an important air quality priority and public health priority in California. Urge an aye vote.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Danielle Osborne-Mills with the Clean Power Campaign. We're a coalition of environmental groups and clean energy developers. We're here today in strong support of the bill. We believe it'll bring much-needed certainty to the market and help get steel in the ground both in California and benefiting California consumers, and of course bring many much-needed jobs to the state.
Mr. Chair and members, Jesus Arredondo on behalf of the Western Power Trading Forum, an organization of over 60 companies working to create many of the jobs that you've heard talked about. We are in a support if amended position. We have been opposed to this bill in the past, but the Senator has made some great progress along with the staff. We appreciate the continued work that needs to be done, I think, on this bill to make it a better bill, and we look forward to continuing to work with the Senator on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Edward Randolph with the Public Utilities Commission. The 4 members of the Commission voted unanimously last Thursday to take a support with amendment position on the bill. We strongly support the bill in concept and think that it's critical to codify the 33% requirement, and look forward to working with the author and the legislature in the future year to resolve some of the technical issues and implementation.
Good morning, Amber Reisenhuber for the Independent Energy Producers Association. IEP member companies currently deliver approximately 80% of California's renewable energy, and we are interested in expanding these investments, creating a significant new tax base, and creating thousands of immediate jobs. So we ask for your support on this bill today. Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Chamberlain with LS Power. We're a developer of renewable and transmission projects here within California, and we support the bill. It provides some needed market certainty, and we urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Audra Hartman with Next Era Energy Resources. Oh, excuse me. We support the bill, and we ask for your aye vote as well.
Mr. Chairman and members, I'm Trudy Schaefer, representing the League of Women Voters of California. We support the bill and urge your aye vote.
Good morning, Chair members. Lisa Rodriguez with the Guaco Group on behalf of AES and Covanta Energy in support of the bill.
Chair members, Alicia Priego with the California Municipal Utilities Association. CMUA represents over 40 electric publicly owned utilities in the state. We do have a support if amended position on the bill. Many of our local governing boards have already adopted the 33% RPS targets. However, existing law has allowed the publicly owned utilities to set their own local target dates and goals. And so we have asked for flexibility in the first compliance period as we're bringing our local programs into alignment with a statewide policy. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and committee members, Phyllis Brown, representing the Southern California Public Power Authority, cities in Southern California with the community-owned electric utility. The Board of Directors has taken a support if amended position on the bill, and we'll just reiterate the concerns expressed by the California Municipal Utilities Association. Thank you.
Melissa Cortez Roth on behalf of the California Wind Energy Association, representing 25 wind energy companies focused on the California market in support.
Mr. Chair and members, Sylvia Solis Shaw on behalf of City of Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa in support of the bill. We look forward to working with Senator Simidian on a couple of remaining issues, but we are again in strong support. Thank you.
Ms. Solis, can you tell me, so are you representing the City of Los Angeles or Mayor Villaraigosa?
Mayor Villaraigosa.
Very good. And does the City of Los Angeles have an official position?
I believe that they just passed a resolution, but the mayor has not signed. I think it's on his desk awaiting signature.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chris Rosa on behalf of Applied Materials in support.
Mr. Chair and members, Greg Cook representing the Northern California Power Agency in support of the bill.
Mr. Chair, members, Cindy Howe with San Diego Gas and Electric. I will associate my comments with those from Southern California Edison, and in turn, we support the bill. Thank you.
Very good. Witnesses in opposition.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Dorothy Rothrock. I'm with the California Manufacturers and Technology Association, and we're opposed to the bill because industry in California already suffers extremely high electric rates. The last information from the federal government is that the average industrial rate in California is 11 cents a kilowatt hour. Other western states have rates between 4 and 7 cents a kilowatt hour. The U.S. average is 6.81 cents. We can't handle higher rates for electricity. This bill will increase rates. If solar and the other renewables are getting as cheap as they say, we don't need a mandate. These technology should be able to compete in the open market. Industry is also facing much higher costs in the future through the imposition of the cap and trade program that's coming down. We also have problems in the bill with the way that energy service providers are treated, in that it makes it much more difficult for them to comply with the bill than utilities. They have a very different business model, and we would like to see that area of the law fixed. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Valerie Torello, Pacific Gas and Electric Company. We have an oppose unless amended position. Feel that there are still some opportunities in the bill to amend it to assist us in managing and mitigating our costs to our customers. We appreciate all the work that's gone into the bill and look forward to continuing to work with the author on possible cleanup legislation to address our concerns. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional witnesses in support or in opposition? Members, any questions for Senator Simidian? Mr. Calderon.
I just have one question, but actually it's from the support and the opposition. I heard support if amended, and then I heard oppose if not amended. And I'm trying to figure out what the difference is. It's okay. It's rhetorical.
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Ms. Harkey.
Thank you. Senator, I know you've worked on this for a long time. It is kind of a long, laborious process you've been through and taken a lot of amendments. I still I have a question for you. There are rate controls and then there are cost caps. Can you explain how those work, please?
The couple of different observations try and meld some of the comments that you heard. At page 20 of the bill, there is a specific requirement that PUC ensure that rates are just and reasonable, a phrase that will be familiar to many of you. At page 35 of the bill, there is a specific reference that the costs of various projects that are approved must be reasonable and prudent costs. Additionally, the bill requires that the PUC adopt a process for the rank order and selection of these projects so that there is what's called least cost and best fit, which takes into account the indirect costs of transmission and the firming and shaping of intermittent resources, the costs of the resource itself, and the viability of the project for the IOU. The PUC, as I say, is also required to adopt a limitation on the cost for procurement expenditures to prevent disproportionate rate impacts based on certain factors. So cost is obviously part of the function of what determines rates, and the PUC has the obligation to both address this from both sides of the question that you asked, both on the costs associated and what costs are appropriate and appropriately approved, and then also to monitor the rate impact. And if the IOU, the investor-owned utility, hits the cost limitation, then pursuant to the provisions of the bill, the IOU can suspend procurement unless the procurement could proceed without exceeding a very modest increase in rates, a de minimis increase in rates. You may have heard a passing reference to transparency as well, Madam Vice Chair, and sort of a good government word. What does that really mean in terms of protecting ratepayers? Well, what it means is that on an annual basis, there will be a report to the legislature from the PUC saying how are we doing on holding down those costs? What are the rate impacts? And in the bill, there's a 2016, let's come back to this and re-examine it at the PUC so that we sort of just don't leave things on autopilot over the course of a 10-year period. Finally, the two closing observations I would make. You heard today that TURN, the utility rate network, which represents residential ratepayers' interests on a statewide basis, supports the bill. And I think even more significantly or equally significantly is we have a letter, and I don't know if it's been passed out to you. If not, let me pass it out to you. But it's from the Division of Ratepayer Advocates. And I want to just read very briefly. It says in the February 11th letter, the Division of Ratepayer Advocates is the independent consumer advocacy division of the California Public Utilities Commission. DRA's statutory mandate is to obtain the lowest rate for utility service consistent with reliable and safe service levels. DRA supports your SB 2X. DRA strongly supports the ratepayer protection provisions in this bill, which would limit program costs by establishing a limitation that prevents disproportionate rate impacts, adhering to the least cost, best fit approach, and by requiring sufficient transparency and reporting. I just close by saying, Mr. Chairman, all of that is in contrast to the existing situation where we have a 33% mandate being driven under executive order at the Air Resources Board. Senator Runner actually asked a very good question on the floor. What happens if this bill doesn't pass? Well, the answer is that not only do you have the PUC pursuing 20% under its own authority, but you've meanwhile got a duplicative effort going towards 33% from the ARB based on greenhouse gases and without the cost cap protections that are in this bill. So if you're more comfortable with duplicative agencies and with a greenhouse gas-based 33% and with no cost protections, then the existing regimen may appeal to you, but I think most folks think that's not the way to go, whether you're for or against 33%.
I understand. I thank you for that lengthy explanation. It's very, very helpful. So what you're saying then is, in essence, this bill controls costs and also controls caps the costs and also controls the rates. And CARB has a goal of 33%, which we are trying to facilitate. Is that, I mean...
CARB's I would think of them as separate conversations because everybody has their own reason for pursuing 33%. Yes, it's a clean air bill. Yes, it's a climate change bill. Yes, it's a energy strategy to prevent market manipulation by virtue of lack of diversity. I would even argue it's a foreign policy bill in terms of allowing the U.S. to pursue a foreign policy based on its own interests rather than its energy needs. And yes, it's a jobs bill. my point is that this measure deals with all of those issues while providing the ratepayer protection and cost control that I think most of us want. Certainly, Assemblymember Fuentes, when he chaired the committee, Assemblymember Bradford currently, and Assemblymember Furutani have all raised these cost concerns with me as I've done it. That's a different approach than the ARB is taking, because they are limited by virtue of statute to just pursuing this based on greenhouse gases, which, as I say, the irony is I think I picked up three Republican votes on the floor of the Senate and 3 members stayed off. And I think part of that was because some of them said 33% is here, let's just figure out how to get it done right, and doing it right to them did not mean over at the ARB with a duplicative process, with no cost controls, and with a greenhouse gas only approach to dealing with this issue.
Well, I appreciate that. So what you're saying here then is we've got a report here saying that at 20% RPS that there was a 21% increase in utilities or thereabouts. And so with the 33% RPS, it's going to be 44. But what you're saying is that's going to be capped, and that, in fact, if CARB has a mandate that's 33% and you can't make that 33% fit into this box legislatively, that CARB then is not in control, but that the legislation is.
The goal of one of the goals of moving this legislation forward is to have the legislation be the defining mechanism by which we reach 33%, rather than a regulatory effort from ARB. And I'll just say on the numbers, members, I've heard virtually every percentage and every cumulative number tossed out during the course of the hearings. Here's what I know. Like many of you, I have an apartment here in Sacramento. My bill came from SMUD. It said for an extra $3 a month, we'll give you 50% renewable energy right now, right here. So, we're making great progress. As you heard from people, the 20% has meant that the technology is pushed forward. That means the cost of those facilities has gone down, even as, of course, the cost of fossil fuels, which are finite and being depleted, goes up. The other interesting point that hasn't gotten much discussion, frankly, is that when you take off some of the demand for natural gas by using more renewables, not just a question of what are the renewables cost, but frankly because you've reduced the demand for natural gas, you're pushing the cost of natural gas down by releasing some of the demand pressure that was previously driving those costs. So it ends up helping on both sides.
Well, I wish you luck. I didn't really want to get into too much of policy decision, but or policy committee, but I really did want to have those questions answered. I am very, very concerned with California standards, as you know. They are here, but I do think the governor said that he did not want sticker shock, so hopefully your bill helps prevent sticker shock on electrical rates, because that's what I've heard out in the community with the biotech and biomed industry, is the cost of electricity is a huge factor for them when they're considering locating in California or remaining in California once they use the brain power, when they're doing the technical manufacturing of medical devices, et cetera. So I hope this helps, but I am very, very concerned with the price of electricity and power in California. I think this might be a nice goal spread out over time, more time. I would like to see the governor actually suspend for a while this and let the state get back on its feet. But I do applaud you're trying to add more flexibility and also grandfathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harkey. Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Samiti, and I thank you for all your work that you've done up to this point. But my question is going to remain kind of consistent as it's been throughout this process. You stated the off-ramps that are in place, and again, I thank you for those additional off-ramps. You stated if power is not available or if it's not accessible. But what about if it's not needed? And I think that's a critical question that I've yet to hear anyone ask. So if it's not needed, is it still a mandate for a utility to purchase that? And I think that needs to be amplified a little clearer, because that is a concern that continues to resonate in the conversations that I have. Are you forcing me to buy something that I don't need?
No.
No? Just simple as that. Okay. And my second question, as it relates to the 88,000 jobs, I want to be clear, because I'm totally in support of the workforce development component that Senator Steinberg is bringing forth. we need to know if those are permanent jobs, and if not, if they're just transitional jobs. I think that needs to be, again, amplified a little clearer, because to throw out a number as great as 88,000 gets a lot of folks excited, but at the end of the day, if they're only temporary jobs, it's not as appealing as if they were permanent jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Senator. I have a question, too, about jobs, because I've seen a number of bills now that are called green jobs bills. And all I see is that they're going to cost us more money. So they basically cost us green. But there's never any assessment or a number put forth as to what each of those green jobs is going to cost us. And I noticed also that you have a number of jobs that are laid out that are government jobs that are related to actually enforcement of this. And the number is, at least for Air Resources Board, you've got a number of $290,000 that will create 2 positions. So the cost for the government jobs is $145,000. The cost for the green jobs, we don't know, and we don't know how long they are and how much they're going to cost us. And I think the real question is, you've stated that you're going to cap the ratepayers, right? You've got DAR saying that they're okay with it because you're not going to stick it to the ratepayers. Who's going to pay the extra $6 billion that it takes to roll out this program, according to Division of Ratepayer Advocates' own study?
Through the chair, if I may, a lot of questions there, Assembly Member. Let me just point out that the study that you reference is, in fact, by the very organization whose letter I read from and which has been distributed to you all, the Division of Ratepayer Advocates. So the very folks who raised the cost concerns that you've referenced in the study that you've referenced are saying they like the bill because it provides cost protection and ratepayer protection, which doesn't now exist.
Right.
As to the jobs issue, I think if you will recall from a few minutes ago, you didn't hear me use the word green jobs. Maybe I did, but the job is a job. I'm with you on that one. The people in my district who are out of work need a job, and they don't care what color it is. I agree. These are hard times, so we have to be mindful of cost containment. That's why the bill contains these provisions. I, frankly, have been reluctant to put any number on job creation. 100,000 is sort of the low end of what I've heard as I've talked to different folks. Just like these numbers that I smiled at Vice Chair Harkey about, with different people having different projections on what the cost increment will be, I frankly think we're better off to talk sort of generically rather than think we can predict with great certainty what will happen 2, 3, 5 years from now. That's why the provisions in the bill provide for the annual check-in on cost containment to make sure that we never lose track of that issue, provide for that revisit in 2016 to make sure that we take a formal look at that issue again, because I share your concern that we make sure with every passing year that this hasn't been renewable energy at any price, it's been renewable energy at a decreasing cost with greater protection for the state against the kind of market manipulation and price spikes that were the biggest hit on business in the last decade that I've been here, following the market manipulation in 2001 when we didn't have this kind of diversified portfolio.
What mechanism do you have in place if you can't raise rates because of the agreement you're saying that you've put in place to cap off that, and yet the renewable energy that you're requiring, the percentage is so high and it's the most expensive energy you can get? It's kind of like you're going to fix the medical system and you're requiring everybody to go to the emergency room where the most expensive care is offered. Somebody's going to pay, whether it's going to be either the ratepayers or the utilities or the taxpayers.
A correction
so
and a clarification.
Who's going to pay if the costs are not contained, which more than likely they will.
Point number one, there is in fact renewable energy available in today's market, which is less expensive than non-renewable energy. Not all of it, but some of it. Point number two, this is one where I would hope I could persuade members to take yes for an answer. The bill specifically provides that if there is going to be, other than a de minimis bump on the cost containment feature, that then the utility backs away. So the answer is, when you say, so, well, who's going to do it? The answer is then the mandate obligation is no longer there if the prices go up too high pursuant to the PUC's regulation. We're allowed to say, sorry, got to step away from it, costs too much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Wagner, followed by Mr. Norby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, thank you for this. I will admit to being, frankly, a little bit conflicted here. My problem is I think the underlying policy is a very bad one, but as the Vice Chairman has suggested and as I've heard from others, that is out there, and I'm not frankly convinced the Appropriation Committee, as opposed to the underlying policy committees or the floor, might be the best place to address those underlying policy issues. I applaud the flexibility in this bill. I applaud the ratepayer protection. I don't know that we got quite an answer to what is a disproportionate rate impact and fully fleshed out those protections. That said, it's my intent at this point probably to lay off this and look at what I understand is coming. We've heard several witnesses say they support if amended. We've heard oppose if amended. We understand it's a compromise document and you're working on amendments. So before I'm prepared to say yes or no to this bill, I'd kind of like maybe you to sketch out for us what sort of amendments we can expect to see, when we can see them. I'm very sympathetic to industry that's coming here and saying at least this gives us some assurances and some certainty. I want to reward that, honor that. I recognize that as a problem. But I'm not sure yet what assurances we have until we know what the amendments are going to look like. Can you tell us what they'll look like?
Well, first, let me say thank you for the things that you applaud. I appreciate the recognition, and I'm quite serious about it. When we try and listen to each other and actually make some progress, I think it's great if we can acknowledge that, even if we've still got significant issues. Second, with respect to the disproportionate rate impact, that is not going to be set in statute. That is a process established in statute for the CPUC, and they will then govern that process. And the notion is that again, that's why I think having the annual reports, having the check-in again 2016, but that is not a number set in statute. That's a process that yields a protection level by the PUC.
Well, if I may interrupt, I mean, my problem is it doesn't necessarily provide a protection if costs are going up to the utilities, and those get passed on, and it's not disproportionate. You know, to add the phrase disproportionate or the word disproportionate in there doesn't necessarily provide any protections when costs otherwise are going through the roof. Yes, it's at least something, but I'd like to see a policy that keeps our energy costs down.
And then on the issue of amendments, Mr. Chair, and I think some of the committee members from the two policy committees have heard this discussion before, this is the bill that's moving forward. The question that I've been asked is, if and when this bill gets off the floor of both houses and is signed by the governor, will I continue to work with folks who have outstanding issues? And the answer is yes. And I suspect that there are other members as well, could be the two committee chairs or not, as they see fit. But we are at a place where we have achieved a very delicate balance in terms of policy, and candidly, a very delicate balance in terms of a coalition coming together to support the measure. So I am loath to unsettle that balance. I understand that for some folks that may mean that they just can't sort of move forward at this time, absent. But what we've got is a case where we're this close, and we've got a lot of folks saying, well, we're okay with the bill as long as you do one more thing for us. And the problem is if you do one more thing for them, that may be at the expense of these folks over here. So what we've said previously is that we'll continue to work on these issues after the fact. It's not like we pass a bill and the challenge of delivering energy, or renewable energy in particular, to California stops. I've always said the signature on a bill is actually the start of the process, not the end of the process. My commitment individually is that I'd be here till it's time for me to walk out the door. The very careful Mr. Bradford in committee said he wanted to make sure it wasn't just the committee door, that it was during the rest of my tenure here, and I have made that commitment at his request.
Mr. Norby.
On the one hand, I'm hearing that renewable energy is already cheaper than non.
Excuse me, Mr. Norby,
some isn't. And if that's the case, then why the mandate? The term renewable itself is somewhat vague. In a sense, nothing is forever. The end of oil has been predicted since the 1850s that we'd run out of it. Someday we will, or someday the sun itself is going to implode and we'll run out of that as well, but it'll probably happen after oil is finished. But if resources do exhaust, their rarity will cause prices to go up and cause other things to be more competitive. That's happened certainly in the past. Windmills precede the internal combustion engine by probably tens of thousands of years if you look at ancient windmills all throughout the world. So I'd rather have the market influence this. I am somewhat persuaded by your argument that we've already messed the market up so much with all these other things that this is a cleanup type of a thing that at least stabilizes it, and that's somewhat persuasive. So those are my thoughts. You don't have to respond to them, but
thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Norby. Members, hearing and seeing no additional comments or questions, Department of Finance, do you have a file on this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Miriam Ingenito with the Department of Finance. Just to note that the bill appropriates $322,000 for additional PUC staff, and we note that it's $137,000 than the PUC estimates its costs to be as a result of this measure. The bill does not provide an appropriation for the other state entities, including the Department of Fish and Game, ARB, or the Energy Commission, and they also have costs.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. The bill has been moved. The bill has been seconded by Mr. Hill. Members, we have a measure. Mr. Simini, would you like to very briefly close on the measure?
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Very good. Thank you. That bill is out on an B roll call. Mr. Wagner is off. Mr. Norby is off.
Wagner and Norby.
Very good. That measure is out. Members, let's go ahead to the next item. Apologies to President Pro Tem Steinberg, who is he there? Oh, very good. Mr. Pro Tem, we're ready for you. My apologies to you, sir, for making you wait. I understand that you're incredibly busy right now. You've got a very good measure, SB 1, Extraordinary Session 1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. I know that both houses are getting to the floor in the next several minutes. I appreciate the time. On the fiscal end here, this bill has been heard and debated in two policy committees, and essentially the idea here is we want to use this as a template to expand career education in California and begin creating a more profound and real link between education and the economy. And green isn't the only way to do it, but it's a good place to start, especially with all the interest and the kind of bill that you just heard a moment ago. So what we say is let's take several $1 million from the Renewable Energy Trust Fund, recognizing that there may be still some questions about that fund, use AB 118, those funds, as a backstop, and let's move this bill to the governor and begin creating what will result from this bill, 90 career academies. Thousands of young people.
Move the bill.
Thousands of young people, Mr. Pro Tem.
Thousands of young people will have the opportunity to pursue a career pathway that will make what they learn more relevant, that has the potential to begin impacting our dropout rate in California, and that, again, hopefully will be a template for how we more fundamentally align education and economic development in this state. I'd urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Very good. Your first witness, briefly.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Lyndon Greco, here representing the Energy Commission. We are very supportive of this program and would like to thank the author for working with us to address the funding source. Thank you.
Very good. Any additional witnesses in support?
Terry Burns on behalf of the California Association of Regional Occupational Centers and Programs and the California Association of Leaders of Career Preparation. We want to commend the author for utilizing these proven strategies for training the job force of tomorrow, so we thank you for that.
Very good. Additional witnesses?
Good morning. Victoria Rome with Natural Resources Defense Council in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Eduardo Martinez on behalf of the Coalition of California Utility Employees, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the California State Pipe Trades Council, and the Western States Council of Sheet Metal Workers in support.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Janice Warden, Office of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson, in support, and we thank the author for his strong leadership on bringing this measure forward. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Danielle Osborne Mills with the Clean Power Campaign, here in strong support of the bill. Thanks.
PG&E in support. Thank you. Valerie Torello.
Very good. Additional witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition?
Not really opposition, but we're sort of in between. We think it's a great program. Donna Brownsey with the Solar Alliance. We think it's a great program what the Pro Tem's trying to do in terms of the training academies. Unfortunately, Thursday it was amended to fund it by taking the money from the Renewable Trust Fund account, which there's only about $44 million left in the new Solar Homes Partnership Fund. Money that was collected from ratepayers for the purpose of building new home construction, high energy efficiency solar homes. So the irony is that, and I understand the difficulties because the Energy Commission didn't want them to take the money from them, so they offered this fund up. So the irony is that the partnership academies will be funded from money that would have been the jobs they're being trained to get. So we are working with our good friend, President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg, to see if we can identify another funding source. We are unhappy about the funding source, but we support the notion of what he's trying to do, and we've had lots of conversations, and we look forward to having many more. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Next witness.
Mr. Chair and members, Bruce Mignani on behalf of Sunrun Solar. It's this exact company that uses monies in that trust fund that's identified to build new solar homes, and we're concerned if those monies are used for this purpose, we won't be able to do projects moving forward in a difficult home selling environment. It is these new solar homes that are actually succeeding today, and so our concerns revolve directly around the fund source. So thank you.
Yes, Chair and members, my name is Dorothy Rothrock with the California Manufacturers, and we're sorry to oppose the bill as well. We're very supportive of career technical education, but we do oppose the use of ratepayer funds for this purpose. Thanks.
Very good. Department of Finance, you have a file?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Miriam Ingenito. The bill does allocate $8 million from the Renewable Resources Trust Fund, and the fee the surcharge and the fee does expire, is not authorized beyond December 31st, 2011. And we do note that the existing program needs are $69 million, and the current fund balance is $44.9 million. We also recognize that there are some outstanding loans to the general fund, but that the current program needs and the current revenues are already in are not currently aligned, and so this would further exacerbate that problem. And then as far as the other fund source, the I forget the name of it, the Alternative and Renewable Fuel and Vehicle Technology Program account, the funds in there are also, we're still looking at that fund, but we do believe that it is fully allocated at this time and would not have sufficient excess revenue to fully fund an $8 million program should it need to be called upon.
Very good. Members, the measure has been properly moved and seconded. Ms. Vice Chair Harkey, the question.
Hi. Why is this not funded from Prop 98? Is this not a school program?
Well, currently, as you know, Madam Vice Chair, the funding level for Prop 98 is in great question, and we're in the midst of a budget discussion right now, the outcome of which will have a great outcome on Prop 98. And so there isn't the resource within Prop 98 at this point to do it. Secondly, even though it's a little unorthodox, in part it is intentional to try to get different silos here to cross over. Why shouldn't the Energy Commission be involved in career education and helping provide the pathway and the pipeline for the workers who are going to be needed in order to fulfill Senator Simitian's RPS bill? Why isn't it that the education world ought to be invested in renewable energy? So in part it's out of necessity, and in part I think it's a great opportunity to sort of cross-pollinate here a little bit, to get government out of its bureaucratic silos and to begin working toward a common agenda, which is educate our young people, create jobs, and make sure that we have a workforce trained for those jobs.
Those are all laudable goals, and under any other circumstance, I'm sure they'd be great. The problem is we're broke, and we're borrowing from every account just to fund our general fund, and now we're taking money from account that I heard has 69 million in needs and 44 in revenue. So it's just a little tough to support. I appreciate your goal, and I would like to see this come out of the Prop 98 when that issue is resolved. Thank you.
Mr. Donnelly.
Senate Pro Tem, I sat on the airplane on the way up here with a guy who runs a manufacturing plant, and he's got a lot of guys that work for him. They laid off half their workforce. So there's an awful lot of people that have a great deal of know-how. They're out of work. And it doesn't seem to me to make any sense to be spending more money to tax them more when they already have the know-how. They know how to build things. They know how to make things. We have one of the greatest, most efficient workforces in the world right here in California. And they don't need any additional training. They just need jobs. So really, why are we spending more money, $40 million, at a time when we're broke? And it just doesn't make any sense to spend more to supposedly maybe somewhere down the line get more people employed. And every bill that comes through here is the same thing.
For one, it's an existing charge. For two, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the demographics of California and the fact that a lot of members of that workforce you describe are going to retire. At the same time, we've got upwards of 40% of Latino, African-American kids dropping out of high school in some districts, and it seems to me that the wisest economic development policy we could develop in this state is to make sure that we have an educated and well-trained workforce, because those workers you're talking about, they're not all going to be in the workforce forever.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Members, any additional questions or comments for the Pro Tem? Hearing and seeing none, the bill has been properly moved and seconded. We are going to call for a Republican roll call.
Harkey?
No.
Harkey, no. Donnelly?
No.
Donnelly, no. Nielsen?
No.
Nielsen, no. Norby? No. Norby, no. Wagner? No. Wagner, no.
Very good. That measure is out. Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. My apologies for making you wait. Members, we are now adjourned.